recommendation for the second reading. The report's been done by our rapporteur, Mr. Faria. It's on carbon dioxide emissions from maritime transport. It's my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Faria for 4 minutes to introduce the debate.
Thank you, President. Commissioner Arias Cañete, Dick. This is for a fourth reading on saving energy. The greenhouse effect and transport was in 2012 road 72%, 12.8% aviation, less than 1% for rail, and 13.9% for shipping. Between 1990 and 2007, emissions of CO2 other than from transport went down 36%. The crisis, austerity, has actually contributed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But unfortunately, that effect has worn off. It's increasing again. Against what's happened in other types of transport, maritime transport is not under any reduction measure or mandate against emission CO2. The goals for 2020 have a review clause for maritime transport to meet the challenges which the Union is supposed to meet, but we've not got to that, and we've not yet got into an international agreement. So this thing we're looking at today is a first step to reduce emissions, and it's about 4% of CO2 emissions within the Union. As against the goals to take carbon out of the European economy on the medium and long term, if nothing is done, ship emissions will go up by about 50% by 2050. Second reading approval of this regulation will satisfy, I think, 3 very significant political goals. First, this European legislative initiative is applicable to all ships who put into European ports and will be an opportunity to influence negotiations in the IMO to regulate. Quite apart from that sort of progress in defining goals, what we've got to do is make sure that cooperation with our international partners is kept to, because it is essential for climatic policy. And the EU has got to be groundbreaking in this area. So we've got to follow those endeavours and make sure that these steps give rise to an ambitious international agreement. And secondly, this legislation will, if you like, monitor the CO2 emissions from ships, make sure the data is transparent. On an annual basis, the European Commission will have an information basis which is reliable on consumption of fuel by ships. In that way, I think we can get rid of barriers to setting up technical and operational measures which will give rise in turn to reductions of CO2 emissions and bring perhaps a lesser cost for fuels, which will in fact improve our international performance. And finally, legislation will give rise to 10,000 jobs in green technology areas linked to the sea, with huge health benefits, reduction of other things, NOx, SOx, and particular particles in suspension. And I think that if we're tough on monitoring the emissions, it is a prior condition, a necessary condition for any other measures which should be taken in the sector in the close-term future. And finally, I'd like to thank the shadows who worked on this: Christopher Fellner, Jut Gutterland, Julie Gerling, Bas Eickhout, Josu Uresti Abounts, and Marco Affronte, as well as Giovanni Lavia and Vice President Benedict Javor for their wonderful cooperation. And I would like to voice appreciation to the European Commission, Mrs. Mary Veronica Pleterski and her team, Roberta Leckie and William Bargum, who was the political advisor in ALDE, who's always been very constructive. Thank you.
My thanks to the rapporteur.